Justin, CNN Democratic Senator Bob Menendez and his Republican colleague Lindsey Graham want to push the Trump administration into a decision about the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So they are drafting this bipartisan bill to amplify pressure on President Trump to take a stand on the killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Friday was the deadline for the administration to say whether it believes that MBS played a role in Khashoggi's killing. Senator Menendez tells CNN the bill may call for holding up nominations or funding for arms sales if Trump doesn't answer Congress. The bill is expected to be introduced next week. The president maintains his discretion to decline to act on congressional committee requests when appropriate. So we'll see if the president addresses this on Twitter. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thank you so much for being with me here on this Monday afternoon. Let's send it to Washington. The Lead with Jake Tapper starts right now.
We're not going to give the president a passo when it comes to his deceptions about immigration and border security. The Lead starts right now. President Trump heading to the border as he repeats the lie that a border wall saved the city of El Paso, Texas. And as the Republican mayor of El Paso even tells the president, "Sir, please get your facts straight." 2 more women candidates are officially in. The historic list of 2020 contenders grows, but facing tough questions already about their substance and their style and what it will take to beat President Trump. Plus, the top U.S. commander in the campaign against ISIS telling a different story than the commander-in-chief, warning that tens of thousands of ISIS terrorists remain in Syria and Iraq. And as CNN sees the fight firsthand on the front lines. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We begin today with the national lead, and as lawmakers are meeting right now to try to avoid the inflicting of pain on the American people by their own government due to yet another partial government shutdown, President Trump is heading to the U.S.-Mexico border tonight, the city of El Paso, Texas, to pick up the political fight that he seems to relish and to continue to spread a falsehood that he loves to trot out, including in his State of the Union address.
The border city of El Paso, Texas, used to have extremely high rates of violent crime, one of the highest in the entire country, and considered one of our nation's most dangerous cities. Now, immediately upon its building, with a powerful barrier in place, El Paso is one of the safest cities in our country.
The president using a false story that the barriers built in El Paso are Exhibit A for why he should get the full $5.7 billion he's demanded for a border wall or barrier or metal slats or whatever it is this week. But here's the problem. Whatever your position on border barriers or a border wall, the case the president lays out about El Paso is simply false. El Paso has never had, quote, one of the highest rates of violent crime in the entire country, according to FBI data. Its violent crime rate has always been well below the average rate for the top 35 cities with a population over 500,000. Lower in El Paso, in fact, than in Houston or in Dallas or in Fort Worth, large Texas cities not on the border. But let's get to the other point. How did the barrier that was built there impact the city? FBI crime data shows that violent crime in El Paso actually peaked in 1993 and continued on a downward trend, falling 60% over the next 13 years. Border wall construction didn't begin until 2008. And then violent crime did not actually drop then. It actually increased 5.5% from the year before construction of the fence started to the year it was completed. Well, you don't believe the FBI? Okay. How about the Republican mayor of El Paso this morning on CNN? He called the president's claim flat wrong.
But the remarks that the president made in the State of the Union were stated originally almost verbatim by our Attorney General some weeks ago, and that's where the erroneous comments came from, that were not correct.
Not correct. Now, it is correct that Customs and Border Patrol officials would like more barriers on the U.S.-Mexico border. That's not in dispute. But the president wants to depict undocumented immigrants as hordes of almost entirely violent criminals, which is not true. So he makes claims that are also not true, like claims that El Paso was once
considered one of our nation's most dangerous cities.
False. Claims that El Paso only became safe
immediately upon its building, with a powerful barrier in place.
False. The president is lying to you to get his border wall. President Trump just wrapped a meeting with White House aides on border wall funding. Any minute, he will head to El Paso for tonight's rally. CNN's White House correspondent Caitlin Collins kicks off our coverage from Texas.
President Trump heading to El Paso for his first campaign rally of the year. Trump hoping to amplify the argument for his border wall in the Texas border city, as border security talks are breaking down in Washington.
I'll say 50-50, we get a deal.
Though the wall was once the central issue in the funding fight, Democrats are now demanding a limit on the detention of illegal immigrants. But Republicans want an exception for criminals. Today, the president called the brand new demand from Democrats crazy. White House officials say if lawmakers can't come to an agreement that includes funding for the border wall, another partial government shutdown could happen, leaving 800,000 federal workers in limbo once again.
Is a shutdown entirely off the table? The answer is no.
But the acting chief of staff left the door open to declaring a national emergency.
Lots of money where all presidents have access to without a national emergency, and there's ones that he will not have access to without that declaration.
Though some Republican senators, including Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, aren't sure he has that authority.
It's probably a gray area in terms of the legality of it. And so that's why I'd rather not go down that road. This should be resolved through the legislative process, through a compromise.
Now, Jake, Mick Mulvaney also said that the president has instructed him to comb through the law and find money in any place that he could. Then, just now in a meeting before leaving the White House to head here to El Paso, the president reiterated his demand that they need a wall. So, Jake, you can guess where this is headed if those congressional negotiators don't come to a deal soon.
All right, Caitlin Collins in El Paso, thanks so much. Let's chat about this with our experts. Amanda, 4 days until the government runs out of money and shuts down. The president is holding this campaign rally, really essentially, to bolster support for a wall and call out Democrats. Will it work? Is this the best way to get the money he needs and to avoid the shutdown?
I'm not sure it's the best way. He's free to make his case, but come on, Congress. Where is the deal? How much more time do you need? I really hate this idea that they're going to work until the government runs out of money on Friday. The American people need some time to absorb whatever it is that they come out with it. So what is it going to be? In my opinion, the fact that they're taking so long, they're just ceding this ground right back to Donald Trump.
Do you agree?
No, well, I'm not sure. Why do you think that? Why do you think they're ceding?
Well, I think
back to Donald
Trump and Pelosi, they've done a good job largely staying out of it, right? So Congress could negotiate, these bipartisan group could come together and work a deal. So where is it?
Right, but I don't know how that makes that the Democrats' fault. I mean, both sides are trying to negotiate.
Fault.
Yeah, both sides are negotiating, and I think that the only reason anyone's trying to get a wall is because of Donald Trump. This isn't a priority of the congressional Republicans.
Wasn't border security a priority for everyone?
Right, but I think the Democrats have been interested in border security, and they've been talking a lot about giving money for, I mean, they're not opposed to the idea of barriers, and they give him more money for a barrier, just not for building like a wall, which he has in the past described as being like the Great Wall of China, right? I mean, that's very different.
I think he might bend on
probably,
that one.
yeah, what they're talking about.
Well, I think I'm sorry, go right ahead.
No, please.
I think what's interesting is that the negotiators, if you hear what's coming out of those meetings, they're not talking about the border wall. They're talking about border security, but the whole idea of 5.7 or even 2 billion or less for a wall is just not there. So I think you're right. This negotiation is all about the wall. Now, what's going to happen is I think they can get a deal in 3 or 4 days, but the real action is it a deal that Donald Trump will rely on and will sign on to? I think not. And then he's got a decision to make whether he declares a national emergency or he combs and finds this other money out there. But he's not getting a wall because the Democrats have the people behind them. Look at the latest polling. And so this is really going to be back in Trump's lap, and it's going to be a test for his leadership, and we have to see what he does.
Do you think the president wants a deal?
Absolutely. Look, the president wants to sign something that has some wall funding in it, sign something that doesn't have a restriction on the number of detention beds. As long as those two things are now that those are sort of the two issues out there. If he gets his wall money, he'll take whatever he gets, something he can save face with. Hopefully it's a decent number. And then he'll go about doing what you just talked about. He'll talk to Mick Mulvaney and say, okay, where else can we find money Just because he got this money doesn't mean that's the only money he can spend. He might do the same. He might declare an emergency on top of this and say, we can spend this money other places.
Well, is it legal money, though? Or is it illegal money?
There are 53 emergencies declared under the Emergencies Act right now. So the idea that what's going on at the border, and you can't make a case of the horror at the border right now that's an emergency. Given look at what the other money has been spent on emergencies, I think it's
a lot of the other emergencies are about sanctions and things like that. But let me ask you: if the president does declare an emergency, Congress then gets to vote on it. It won't pass the House because the Democrats control, and there are Republicans in the Senate who are concerned that it won't pass the Senate either. That there's 47-53, that there are 6 or 7 Republicans who might not support it. You just heard conservative senator from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, expressing concern.
Yeah, I would say that if the president puts up a responsible program for, not building the Great Wall of China, I agree. If he puts up the Great Wall of China, he's not going to get the votes in the Senate to do that. But he puts up something that shows that it's worked with the border security people, that really came from a grass, from the bottom up. I think he'll get the votes for it.
So, Amanda, I want you to take another listen to the El Paso Mayor Dee Margo, who has been out there saying that what the president says about El Paso, it was a violent city, then they built a wall, and now it's a safe city, is just not true. It's just not borne out by any measure of crime data or anything else. Take a listen.
We were going back to 2005, one of the safest cities in the nation. The barrier went up and the fence went up, and it's only about 10 miles long, and the total fencing in the El Paso sector is about 78 miles, and it's not continuous. Now it's part of the process for border security, but it's not the total panacea.
Now, again, Customs and Border Patrol does say that in parts of the border, they would like more border barriers or fencing or whatever. Mm-hmm. But this El Paso story is just not true.
Yeah, the president likes to make the most provocative case, not necessarily the most factual case. I question the wisdom of his team sending him down to El Paso without at least getting the mayor on board with you. Usually you don't go into someone's backyard knowing that they're going to trash your speech in advance. But the president does have a good case to make if he would make it. The number of asylum seekers coming to the border has overwhelmed the number of judges that can process their claims, has overwhelmed the number of facilities that our border security can handle. He could stick to the facts and make a good case. And so I think this is just an unforced error. And I'm very curious to see how Beto O'Rourke handles this. This, to me, there's a lot of Democratic presidential candidates, aspiring candidates, who say, I want to fight President Trump. I'm the person to do it. Beto's actually going to do it tonight.
Holding
and I
a
think that says a whole lot more than anything, Amy Klobuchar or Kamala Harris has done so far.
Yeah, but adding more beds, for example, just doesn't make sense, just like the wall doesn't make sense. U.S. money would be better spent by investing in those countries where the immigrants are coming from, one, investing in border security, not the wall, technology, hiring more people, because when you add more beds, you're buying into this fact that they're just going to come at all costs, and so let's just have beds. We're holding them outside of the U.S. right now in camps. It makes no sense. We need a broader policy.
And we should point out that the U.S. State Department has requested more money to put in those countries for that kind of investment you're talking about.
Economic development.
Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Let's go back to the potential shutdown part of this. Take a listen to White House Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney.
We cannot definitively rule out a government shutdown at the end of this week.
You absolutely cannot, and here's why.
Okay.
Let's say, for sake of this discussion, that the Democrats prevail and the hardcore left-wing Democrats prevail. There was a Democrat congresswoman who put out a tweet yesterday about $0 for DHS. So let's say that the hardcore left wing of the Democrat Party prevails in this negotiation, and they put a bill on the president's desk with, say, zero money for the wall, or $800 million, some absurdly low number. How does he sign that? He cannot, in good faith, sign that.
There is no indication that there's going to be zero money. There's indication it's going to be a couple $2 billion at least for border fencing. But it does look like the shutdown is still a possibility.
Yeah, and I think, and it's outrageous. I mean, it's the fact that our government isn't able to function without, having these sort of careening back and forth between these ideas of shutdowns is highly problematic. I do think it's important to remember how the shutdown happened, though. That the last shutdown, which is that President Trump was willing to actually give on the issue of the wall, and then Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter and a bunch of people on the right freaked out, and he sort of caved to that. So I think his initial impulse probably was right. He recognized that this isn't something that the Democrats want to give him. I don't think it's a hard left position to oppose the wall.
Everyone stick around. We're going to keep talking about this. The president just weighed in on the latest obstacle you heard us talking about as lawmakers right now are racing to prevent the next government shutdown. That's next then. President Trump not wasting any time going after his 2020 Democratic opponents and openly using some racial slurs. Stay with us.
Dealing with psoriatic arthritis pain was so frustrating.
My skin, it was embarrassing.
My joints, they hurt.
The pain and swelling.
The tenderness.
The psoriasis.
I had to find something that worked on all of this.
I found Cosentix. Now, watch me.
Real people with active psoriatic arthritis are getting real relief with